Hey, how's it going, everybody? I hope everybody had a great new year. Thank you so much for supporting this channel, and thanks for watching this video. A few years ago, one of my friends told me about this cool design challenge that he had heard about. I don't know the origin of it. I don't know exactly where it came from, but you take a random Unsplash image, a random Wikipedia article, and a random quote from, I think it's quotes.com, and you take those elements and you try to put together an album cover. I thought it'd be a really fun video to make. So it used to be in the past that I would use Sketch to do this back during the days when I was using Sketch, but we can use AI to do this for us. So it's pretty awesome. So let's go ahead and do this. If you want to follow along, just go to ChatGPT or whatever you use for your AI, and we're just going to say, give me a random, if I can spell correctly, Unsplash image, a random Wikipedia article, and that will be the artist name, and then a random quote from quotes.com. And what we're going to do is take about the last 3 to 5 words of that quote, and that's going to be the album title. So those are the 3 things that we need, and let's go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. Now, the rules to this game are pretty simple, just no cheating. You have to take the very first thing that is given to you, and that's kind of the whole point of the design challenge, is to use what you have to work with. Sometimes you run into those types of situations as professional designers. You are given what the client has, what the branding is, and you just have to work with what you got. So it's a really fun challenge to do something like that. So first off, let's take a look at our random image, and we're just gonna go, okay, for some reason it's not giving me just one particular random image. So what I'll do is filter this to free, and we'll just grab that first image right there. So I'm gonna right click and copy this, and I'm gonna go into Photoshop, create a new document, and I'm going to do 12.5 by 12.5 at 300 resolution. That's about what you would design for like a record. So we're just going to do this. Now, the key thing to this type of challenge is that you don't have to use the image as is. That image just has to be your base. So we can do whatever we want to this image, whatever creative things that we want to do with it. We just have to use this image as our base. All right, now let's go back to our results and see our random Wikipedia article. I'm going to click on this, if it'll let us. All right, so the artist name is United Nations Security Council Resolution 1140. It's kind of like the Presidents of the United States of America. So that is our band name or group name, whatever it's going to be. And I'm going to go in here to Illustrator, just create a new document. It doesn't really matter the size. And I'm just going to throw that text down really quickly. I wonder if there would be an interesting way to kind of abbreviate this. So UNSCR 1140, maybe that could be the actual band name. Let's say that this band has been around for a long time and everybody just abbreviates it to Unscrew 1140 or something. I don't know. I'm just a little bit on the silly side this morning. All right, so our random quote is a quote from Albert Einstein. So we are going to take roughly the last 3 to 5 words of this. So that is going to be, the other is as through everything is a miracle. So let's say as through everything is a miracle. That's actually a pretty cool title. So as through everything is a miracle. That is technically 3 words, but you could say through everything is a miracle. So let's just do that. All right, so I think we're going to do, we might do something where we can actually combine the 2 of those, the abbreviation and the long form, so we can just kind of see that. And I actually do like that quote being paired with this particular image. But what we need to do is I want to first center this on the page. So I'm going to change my centering point right there to this. And now I'm going to turn that off just temporarily. Let's bring our guides in. And that's going to snap directly to the center. Now we'll turn this back on and then just kind of eyeball it. I'm not worried about getting it exactly precise, but that looks to be about center. We might just kind of bring it up a little bit. And then we'll just turn those guides off and see what we can do with this. Now, I'm not too big on the color palette of this. I do like the image, but I'm not too big on the color palette. So I'm going to change the hue and saturation a little bit and just kind of change things around. We still want it to look natural. Or maybe we don't. I don't know. Maybe we can completely go a different direction and just kind of invert the hue and saturation. That actually seems like a cool idea. But what we've got here is we've got some artifacts that are being left over from that. So what we can do to fix that, this thing is ticking at me for some reason. What we can do to fix that is to add in a couple of textures and layer a few different things on there to kind of hide that artifact a little bit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to create a new layer, and we're just going to call this grain. I'm going to shift and delete to fill this with 50% gray. Now let's go up here to filter, camera raw filter. And we're going to turn up the grain, and I'm going to keep the size at 25 and the roughness at 25 because we want just a little bit of grain there, but we don't want it to overwhelm us. And now we're going to bring down the vignette, probably -10, and hit enter twice. And then we're going to change the blending mode to overlay. So what we've done here is created a slight grain overlay to kind of help cover up that artifact effect that's happening whenever we change the colors. Because when you do a big color shift, it kind of leaves some of those areas where the colors are blending from one to the other, kind of creates some artifacts in between those areas. So that grain layer just kind of helps to kind of cover that up a little bit. And if you want to keep on going with that, you can bring in some overlays. So let's do that. All right, so I have my own resources library right here, and I've got some overlays right here, and I've also got some paper textures, but we'll see what we've got here. We've got some distress layers. We've got some grunge skies. That would be interesting to kind of see what we can do with blending these two images together with a really cool sky pattern, and it's already got that grunginess to it. So let's open this one up and see what we can do with this. So I'm just going to drag this on top of here. Let's size this up. You know what would be really interesting visually if we didn't adhere to any kind of rules would be to maybe slightly rotate it and just kind of think of this as design alchemy a little bit, where we just kind of bring stuff in and there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. Let's just make this whole thing an art project. So let's cycle through the blending modes and just see what jumps out at us. It's actually really cool so far. So let's do this real quick. Sometimes I go through every single one of them and there's not really one that grabs me, but hopefully we run into something like that. That's actually pretty interesting. I like this. So let's use this as our starting point, and maybe we go back to 0 for this, and let's center this on the document, and then let's hold down Option and Shift to kind of bring it in like this, where we're really distorting it. And if you're ever going to distort something, that's fine. You just have to make it really obvious that you are distorting it. Otherwise, it's not going to look quite right. And really, at this point, you're working with something that you can't even tell what the original document was to begin with. So it's really totally fine to do something like this. And what if we went back to our clouds and brought in a different image? So let's do that, and we'll bring this in here, and we'll just kind of see what happens as we blend these layers together. I feel like that lady from Edward Scissorhands, and we blend and blend and blend. That's interesting, but I don't really want the darkness, so we'll invert it, and that is actually pretty cool right there. So let's maybe rotate a little bit. That's cool. I think that we should probably have it maybe bleed off the edges just a little bit where that corner is. Yeah, that is cool. I like that. I'm not really a big fan of this little area right here where it's showing this little section. What you want to do is, if you've got like a little section, you want to make sure that none of it is showing at all, or a pretty big amount is showing. You don't want to show a very small amount because that can look like a mistake. So we're just going to bring it down to about right there to where it seems a little bit more obvious. And then at this point, let's see what else we can do to kind of bring in some interesting textures. I've got ones here that go all the way back to when I was in design school. It's pretty crazy, actually, to think that I still have all of these. But let's just bring this in just for fun, and we'll just kind of make this super crazy big, and we'll only have it cover a specific portion of it. And I actually want this side to be on the left side, so we'll just kind of bring this right up around here. And then we'll just change the blending mode to where only that red is going to be showing. And maybe we do something like that, where it kind of interferes and is working with the rest of those blending modes. So whenever it passes over a different image, it becomes a different color. That's a very interesting approach to that, I think. So we've got multiply right now, but let's see what else we can do with this. I'm not too big a fan of the green, but I think it'll work just fine, and maybe we can go in and kind of change those colors around a little bit. So difference is really interesting. We've got kind of like a fire effect going on. Let's see what happens when we invert those colors, and that puts the fire effect up here, and it kind of removes that bounding box that's kind of limiting that shape right there. And then from this point, you can just kind of move this wherever you want to. And that is kind of an interesting area for that to be in. And then I feel like if we're going to have something in the top left, we should have something in the bottom right. So let's see what else we can grab. This is an interesting shape right here. Let's bring this in. Honestly, I do not remember where I found all of these things, but some of them I made and some of them I didn't, obviously. This is not one of the ones that I made. That is cool right there. I like this, how it's interacting with the rest of those colors. So this is cool. I think that what we've got here is kind of like a late 90s, maybe early 2000s feel to it, where we've got all of these different areas and all these different elements coming together to create different layers, different colors and everything. And this is just a really fun project to kind of use a base image and throw some textures on top of and just play with and see what you can do with it. Now, what I feel like this needs is that kind of late 90s, early 2000s type of typography that we had back during that time. And it's a very specific style that I'm thinking of, and there is an artist who did that type of stuff. I just did one of his master classes or Skillshare classes. I need to be reminded of his name, and then we'll do something in that style. Okay, so the designer is David Carson, and if you haven't taken his course, I highly recommend it. He's got a really cool collage approach when it comes to typography. And so I'm thinking of something kind of like this. So let's just open this up and let's grab that image and copy it, and let's bring it into Illustrator. And I'm going to copy this over here, and then also our band name, which is that UNSCR 1140. It's actually kind of cool. This really does lend itself well to this type of design style. So let's take a look at this. And for some reason, I'm really feeling impact. We're obviously not going to leave it exactly as it is. We're going to do a little bit of stretching, manipulation to the actual type itself. So I think that we're going to do that. And what we're going to do is we're going to create outlines and then ungroup everything so that each item is its own element, and then it's all going to be kind of collaged together like that. Is collaged a word? I don't know if I just said that or made that up or whatever. All right, so a U right here, I want a nice strong U, but we don't want to get too outside of proportion right here. So we've got a U and then an N, and then let's rotate this S right here. And we're just assuming that this band is so well known that people are going to be able to see this. And who knows, maybe this could be their entire brand identity. This is their logo. So we could probably rely a little bit on that. And this really should be something that I turn off smart guides for, because we don't want things to be too mathematical. So let's go up here to view, smart guides, and just turn that off. And then I'm thinking for the number, it probably should appear as one particular block. So let's bring this over here, and we can do something kind of like this, where it's all in the same block, but maybe we just grab those anchor points at the bottom and just kind of manipulate this a little bit. And maybe bring this in a little bit thinner. The 4 can possibly be rotated, maybe we can do that. Just kind of bring this up here a little bit. Maybe the 0 can also be that way, and we'll just kind of thin up that 0 a little bit. So that's an interesting composition right there. I think what we could do here, just to kind of make it all a little bit more part of the same unit, is to bring this up here, and then we'll grab these anchor points right here and do a little bit of stretching into that area. And then we'll grab this right over here and just kind of align this with this side. All right, so that is a cool composition that we've got there. So what we're going to do is select all of this as one unit. We're going to bring this into Photoshop, and we're going to paste as a smart object. Let it do its thing real quick. And now we just got to figure out exactly where we're going to place this. This is interesting right here, how it's kind of interacting with those areas. And you got to remember, we are designing something that is very late 90s, early 2000s. So bigger and bolder is totally acceptable for something like this. You can even go a little bit crazy with it. So obviously for something like this, we wouldn't really necessarily do something like this in this big, bold of a style here in 2026. But during this time period, if you're trying to mimic this time period, you can do kind of anything you want to, really anything goes. So we're just going to rotate that really quick, and let's go in here to just kind of zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to go in here to filter and blur and Gaussian blur, and we're just going to kind of soften that edge a little bit. Actually, we're going to soften that edge a lot. So we're going to bring it up to about 5. 5 looks pretty cool. And let's manipulate exactly how this is going to blend into the rest of our layers. So let's double click on our Vector Smart Object. Don't worry, I will rename that here in a second. We're going to go over here to our underlying layer. And I'm going to hold Option and click on the left caret. And we're going to just kind of bring this down to where it's not entirely completely black. And we're seeing that background kind of blend with the rest of this composition that we've got here. So it kind of helps to give it a little bit more of an aged look. All right, so that's a really cool blending. I'm wondering if there's any better way that we can actually put this onto the page. We have to remember that it's working with all those layers. And then also, one thing to keep in mind is that we've got several layers of different types of artwork that's going on. So if we stick that in between any other layers, it is going to look different. So let's try moving this above that layer right there. And the reason we can't see this is because of how much we've brought this down. So let's bring this back up, and you can see how that's directly interacting with that. So you're definitely going to have to manipulate the blending according to what layer it's on top of. So I actually really do like this. So let's bring this down a little bit. It only needs to be a little bit, like 254, because any more than that, you're not going to be able to read it very well. So let's kind of keep this in roughly a lighter area, but it can still kind of overlay right here. And that is actually pretty cool. I like that. Although I don't know if I want it to blend. I think I'm going to bring it all the way back up. I just think it makes a stronger statement this way. And I'm going to increase the sizing a little bit so where it's kind of obviously going off of that frame that we've got there. And I think that is looking really cool. All right, so in order to balance this, we want to have our album title probably down here in the bottom left area. And what I'm wanting to do in this area is what we saw a lot of in the mid to late 90s, and that is a typewriter font. So we've got our Through Everything is a Miracle. Right now it's Myriad Pro, but we are going to use Type Eka, I believe. There's actually one font, here it is, Typewriter Cameo. So this is the one that actually has a black background as part of the font, and then we've got that kind of typewriter look that we've got going on here. And I actually really like this particular composition. When we bring this into our main artwork, I think it's going to blend really well. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create outlines with this. And as you can see, there are bounding boxes around each one of these glyphs. That means that we can individually separate these. And that is going to be a very cool look. So let's ungroup everything. And now I'm going to move everything that's down here down to the bottom. And we're just going to kind of experiment with spacing a little bit. So why don't we do something like this, where we kind of do everything a little bit on the random side to kind of make it look a little bit kind of like a ransom note. We just kind of do this, but we obviously want to make sure that it is legible. And why don't we do something like this, where we're mimicking that same design style and the artist's name. I wonder if we could do something like that. Maybe it's being communicated as a Y. So let's do that instead. And then for the everything, I think we can leave all of those upright and just kind of apply even spacing across these. That actually looks really cool. And then for the is, we'll bring is down here Actually, I think I want it a little bit more in line with that N. And then we'll bring that S really far down. And then A right here. And then we'll do Miracle. And maybe we'll rotate the M to kind of balance that out a little bit. We'll bring this up here just to kind of make it look like the M was right next to it and just kind of fell over. I think that's an interesting look. And what if it kind of tapers off at the end right there? And then we'll grab all of this and bring it a little bit here to where it's closer and everything is a little bit more like a unit. And we don't necessarily have to do this, but maybe just kind of it's creeping into this negative space a little bit. And maybe it's doing something kind of like that, you know, like just making its own pattern. That is actually really cool. I like that. So let's copy that and bring this into Photoshop. And now let's try to put this below this layer. Okay, for the most part, everything is legible. Let's bring it all the way to the top. And then we'll blend this particular piece of artwork with everything else. All right, so we've got this layout right here, and this is cool. I wonder if maybe the E just kind of bleeds off the page a little bit. That would be an interesting way. And if it does it over there, maybe we can just kind of get it smack up against here. Yeah, I think that's looking really nice. Now let's do the same thing for this type. Of course, since this type is a lot smaller than our main type, we need to bring it down more. So probably around 2 pixels, like 1 to 2 pixels, something like that. Just kind of soften it a little bit. And I think that is looking really cool. All right, so there is our Unsplash random Wikipedia article, random quotes generator design challenge, where we took all of these different elements and just improvised something. We put something together, and I didn't intend this to be a David Carson art piece, but it just kind of turned into that. You never know what these types of design challenges are going to turn into. I actually think this is really cool. This looks like something that he would have demonstrated in his course that I took. He does have a course on Masterclass, and it is excellent. I highly recommend it if you are a graphic designer, design student, you're studying design, whatever it is. I really hope you got something out of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.